12 permanents in play.
Yeah, I did get the chance to see someone today with Xenagos and Voyaging Satyrs and Nykthos. Let's say there was monstrous Pelucranos for X equals 15. While watching around tables, I saw that one happen. So
that is a big number.
That's a casual 31 mana to make that play.
Oh, that's all? Just 2 Emrakuls and a Reach Through Mists? That's all it takes?
Now, so Nick's going to lead off on a forest. He does not have the turn 1 mana creature, so no Mystic. Cedric responds with a Temple of Deceit. But Nick does have the 2 mana ramp spell in Sylvan Caryatid.
Alright. The mana boost. The mana creature not necessarily as potent against the Supreme Verdict deck, but getting just the leg up, getting on board early, especially from the play, is really, really important.
Well, the thing is that normally you'd think a green aggro deck has trouble with board sweepers, where the green-red Devotion deck really has shown to be powerful is the number of planeswalkers it plays in the main. And we'll see that right now as Nick manages to ramp into a turn 3 Xenagos. He's able to sneak that under counter spells. Of all the planeswalkers, this one's one of the less threatening ones, but still all of them are pretty threatening just by virtue of being a planeswalker.
Yeah, still pretty threatening. And also plays along with that ramp aspect as well with its +1. That's gotta go, says Cedric Phillips, and he needs Attention Spheres.
Yeah, so that's going to get Attention Sphere. As a note, Nick is on 6 cards this game, but he is on the play.
Land tapped. Let's see what the follow-up is.
Follow-up. So Nick making a lot of plays while Cedric's counter spells are down. Granted, he doesn't have too many counter spells pre-board. This one's going to be Nylea, God of the Hunt. It's not actually too threatening as Nick doesn't have a Nykthos down yet.
Right.
And it's likely in this matchup that he doesn't tend to get Devotion in this deck of 5
it is,
in this matchup.
It is far less likely here than in other matchups. Supreme Verdict is quite good against Devotion, generally speaking.
So Cedric with a full grip of cards here has been able to take care of the first couple plays from Nick. What he has to do is that the green-red Devotion decks usually have like 3 or 4 business spells in a given game, and Cedric has to find ways to take care of those 4 spells and before he casts something like a Revelation.
Right, and do so in a mana and time efficient manner.
Yeah. So he casts the Jace, Architect of Thought, immediately puts it down to 2, which makes it vulnerable to that Satyr token to find 2 lands and an Azorius Charm.
Yep, this is a little divination.
Yeah, so it's a divination gain 2 life.
Yep, basically.
So what are your thoughts? He's doing that instead of plussing the Jace.
Yeah, there's always the threat that Nick can achieve Devotion on the next turn, and then the Nylea can kill it anyway.
Yeah, but something like Arbor Colossus could get him Devotion.
Exactly. But I think more likely, well, there it is. And look how smart Cedric looks now.
Yeah, so
getting a little value out of that Jace instead of having it die right away.
Yeah, so Arbor Colossus is made. That puts him up to 5 green symbols. The Satyr goes ahead and hits Cedric, whereas the Nylea, Satyr hits the Jace, while the Nylea hits Cedric. Cedric's now down to 8.
And under a lot of pressure.
Yeah, it seems likely that he'll be able to take care of the Arbor Colossus here. I mean, if he can't, that's very bad for him.
Yes, I would agree.
It's going to shock down to 6 off Godless Shrine. We see Sphinx's Revelation, Detention Sphere, among other cards. Looks like the Sphere's going to be cast.
Sphere plus Charm. Not a bad turn.
Yeah, Cedric, now with the Divination, he's up 3 cards this game, being on the draw, the Mulligan, and the Jace.
The question is whether he can convert that, and it's going to start with a Detention Sphere. He's not even sure what he wants to target.
Yeah. Now, so there's what do you say? It's got to be between the Nylea and the Arbor Colossus.
Yes.
The Nylea. So what are your thoughts here?
Well, the Arbor Colossus makes the Nylea good.
Right.
But the Nylea, if it gets good, if it gets active again, then it's much harder to answer. I think I like Cedric's play. Take out the Colossus.
All right, he's going to go ahead and take that one down. Nick, with just 2 cards left, he draws Xenagos for the turn.
That's not bad.
And the last card is Nykthos, which he's going to go ahead and make. Now, Nick knows about the Azorius Charm in Cedric's hand, which is really just going to be a Doomblade here.
Yeah.
Both the cards the only attackers are going to be Satyr tokens. And Nick currently just has access to 3 mana, so he's not going to be able to use Nylea to pump any creature just
not quite yet.
one satyr gets put on top. Cedric goes down to 4.
And a Doomblade drawn for the turn, so that's another effective, stopgap, but it doesn't deal with the Planeswalker itself.
Yeah, well, we know Cedric has the Sphinx's Revelation. There's the difficulty that he's at 4 and his opponent's making 2/2 haste creatures.
Right.
That's
He's under a little pressure. Not to mention the Nalia pump, each one represents lethal.
So if Nick just makes 2 satyrs here, Cedric needs 2 kill spells.
Yes.
Reason being, if Cedric does nothing, he dies, and if he kills one guy, Nick pumps the other one.
Correct.
And we'll see, does he have the 2 kill spells?
Looks like a Charm and a Doomblade.
Yep, swing with the 2 satyrs. Cedric starts by Doomblading a token. And Nick's going to go for a pump on the other one, and that'll get charmed.
Alright, so not bad. Now he kind of has his turn off to Revelation.
Yep, and he does have the Revelation. We see a draw of Detention Sphere, so he may take a pause to remove the Xenagos. And
yep, I like that.
I think that's exactly what we're going to see. Cedric is stabilizing here at 4. Remember, because this green-red Devotion deck is green first, it does not have cards like Lightning Strike or Storm Breath Dragon to top deck for the win here.
Right. There's no reach to worry about. The red is for the Planeswalkers. So we do see Detention Sphere take out another Planeswalker.
Yeah, a whole collection of Detention Spheres here. Cedric's building his own devotion to both blue and white.
And a couple of lands in Nick's hand, a little frustrated flick of the cards there.
Yeah, I think
so
one of them's
Cedric,
a Nykthos.
That is unfortunate. And Cedric gets to untap with a ton of lands and a Sphinx's Revelation in his hand.
Yeah, and here's a telltale play. At 4 damage, Cedric shocks to play Watery Grave. That is
Magic
you know
Online,
exactly
I would be conceding right now.
He's like, oh, that's great. He has, and look how Cedric lays out his lands. He shocks, puts 3 lands off to the side, puts the rest in a pile, and says go. You're just like, oh, I see. And a good draw for Nick, though. This is going to be Garruk, Caller of Beasts.
That is not bad.
That's a huge draw. I think it's probably the best card he could draw at this moment.
Yeah, it's certainly up there. Now a plus is going to hit
Nylea.
Just the Nylea. All right.
All right, so the question is, Cedric, off this Revelation, will want to hit either a Hero's Downfall or that 4th Detention Sphere. He goes up to 7 on the Revelation.
Yep. And now, with 1 away from Devotion of 5 for Nylea to be active.
Yeah.
And a Garruk in play.
And the draw for the turn was the Hero's Downfall that he needed.
Ooh, solid.
Didn't get it off the Revelation, got it off the draw.
He was saving it.
Yeah. And Cedric, I almost feel like he dodged a bullet there when the Garruk only drew 1 card.
Yes, for sure. He had to be breathing a sigh of relief there. Especially because it was a card that doesn't even activate the Devotion to 5. That was definitely fortunate for Cedric.
So Downfall takes care of the Garruk. Cedric now left with a Jace in hand and a Blood Baron of Vizscopa.
Pretty good position.
He's going to go ahead and lead off on the Jace. He still has Azorius Charm left in hand, and it seems as though he's pulling away here. He did now reach his devotion to blue, thanks to the Jace.
This is the classic divination now or divination later.
Yep, Cedric goes for the divination later.
All right.
And 2 lands to left, passes back to Nick, and draw not very helpful for him. It's going to be Voyaging Satyr.
Just what he was looking for.
He has an extra Nylea in his hand, I think, and an extra Nykthos. So the whole playing multiples of legendary cards thing
sometimes bites you. Yeah, sometimes not so good. Verdict, Dissolve, Revelation.
And none of them particularly good options. Dissolve, an excellent card in this matchup, but you really don't want to give your opponent a Revelation.
I don't want to, call a game over before it's over, but...
Well, Nick, rather than splitting the piles, just concedes to those 3 cards.
A wise choice, I believe.
So,
yeah, Nick flooded out a little, and Cedric's draw would match up near perfect against Nyx.
Well, that's the thing. Sometimes these, especially this green-red deck, Devotion deck, plays a lot like a ramp deck.
Yeah.
So, it's got its mana accelerants, it's got its lands, it's got its haymakers. And in the kind of, control deck versus ramp deck, usually what happens is that the control deck has to answer the first 3 or 4 plays of the ramp deck. And after that, it's usually in the clear.
Yep. And that's exactly what we saw.
So, if you look at it that way, ramp versus control, tell me about how Cedric boards them.
Well, a Thoughtseize is usually pretty good against a deck that needs a is working towards a specific card. Besides that, negates don't really cut it because if you're going to answer Planeswalkers, I think the 2 Pithing Needles are better choices. Although maybe you want both. Maybe Planeswalkers are that important in the matchup.
Nick does play 8 in the main, so that seems fair.
And that looks to be about it.
It's interesting, Cedric has only the 2 counterspells in the main, and we saw when he played the Espermere, he boarded all the way up to 7 counterspells, but the counterspells he chose were negates and gainsays, which against something like this greener Devotion deck, don't actually counter that many spells.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of people having, say, 2 dissolve and then boarding a 3rd as a more well-rounded counterspell, but Cedric going for the cheaper, narrower versions for specific matchups. And yeah, let's see if he gets punished for it here.
Yeah, so as it turns out, then post-board favors Nick a little bit, or at least he has more to board in. He has a trio of Mistcutter Hydras, which are just for this matchup. As in, just what he wants to do is, I think, a lot of times in this matchup is, so I said there's 3 components to his deck. There's mana ramp, there's lands, and there's haymakers. He usually wants to take out some of the mana ramp and add in more haymakers.
Right.
He's gonna add in he has 3 Mistcutter Hydras, he has a Rurik Thar, and he has a Destructive Revelry in the board, all of which probably come in.
Yep, I would imagine so. And Cedric's answers to the Hydra are just the 4 Doomblades and 3 Heroes Downfalls. And the Heroes Downfalls are going to be a little overloaded.
Yeah, he almost wouldn't want to spend one on a Hydra if he could help it.
Right. And then, Supreme Verdict after taking a hit works. Detention Sphere does not. Azorius Charm does not. So that Hydra's going to be a fairly effective card.
This is one of the matchups, though, where Azorius Charm is still good, right?
Yes. I would think so. I mean, anytime that you're being attacked by creatures that are affected by summoning sickness, Azorius Charm is going to be a huge tempo gain.
So how do you board out then in the matchup? Cedric, he only has the 3 ways to win the game. Can he cut some of those? That'd be my question is, how do you respond with boarding out cards? It seems like his deck was already mostly just removal.
Yeah, removal and card draw. How do you cut from that?
Right, how do you cut from that to get other things?
Blood Baron's probably not great because it just gets outclassed and the protections don't matter.
Can you just have 1 Aetherling and no other way to win?
Aetherling and Jace, and that's it.
You don't have to worry about Aetherling being the bottom card of your deck because you have Jaces.
True. And he does have a second Aetherling in the board. So I think that's a viable route. I mean, the life gain from Blood Baron's good, theoretically, but...
Well, he's not very big in this matchup.
Yeah, you're taking such huge hits. Your life total is going down in big chunks most of the time.
It seems like most creatures from Nick's deck can kill a Blood Baron.
Yeah.
Even a Burning Tree Emissary with Nylea kills Blood Baron.
Yeah, that is not profitable. So I would say maybe the Blood Barons can go, and then maybe you just have to cut the counters because you're too busy doing sorcery speed things, like Supreme Verdict's too important. Maybe. I don't know.
It's hard to say.
It also depends on player draw.
That seems pretty fair. It might be that we see a Verdict leave just because the other 1-for-1 removal that's instant speed is probably just better than Supreme Verdict in the matchup.
Yeah, I could see shaving a Verdict.
Either way, Cedric has a lot of removal. He has access to just even more removal after board.
Yeah.
What's interesting about the matchup is, when Cedric's deck is literally all removal and just card draw, you'd expect it to be good against a ramp style strategy, but Green Red actually has a lot of play in the matchup just because its threats are all so diverse. Cedric has to have...
And explosive.
Yeah.
It gets such explosive draws that it doesn't matter, how many answers you have in hand, you're going to die before you can deploy them all.
Yeah, it's almost like Cedric has to have the right answer, you know, at the right time.
Yeah.
And the problem is, if he doesn't have the answer on curve, he's gonna, you know, he'll pay the price really hard, like 8 damage immediately.
Yes. Yeah, every turn you don't answer, say, a Planeswalker, you're falling further and further behind.
Right.
So here we see Nick pulling up his 7, thinking about it.
He was on 6 last game. He'll be on 7 this one, though, so he keeps.
Cedric ruining the playmat.
And Cedric immediately keeps 2. So we see
All
the
right.
best start for the Devotion deck is a turn 1 Elvish Mystic. What Cedric typically in this matchup would be worried about is a turn 2 Dome Rerod. It's the
Yes.
best. That's pretty much the god draw against every deck. Cedric does have the Pithing Needle in hand, though, so he has a defense to it.
Scries to the top there. Pithing Needle is definitely going to be an interesting card because you kind of want to preempt the Planeswalker, but you also don't know which one to name yet.
So no turn 2 Dominate. It's going to be a hit from Elvish Mystic, a Nykthos for Nick, and then Sylvan Caryatid.
All right. Ramp, ramp, ramp.
Yeah, I can play a 5-drop next turn.
He's building to something.
And Cedric just shaping his hand with temples right now.
Just looking at the game state right now, look how far behind Cedric looks.
Well, yeah, he has a tap land on turn 2, whereas Nick's going to make a 5-drop.
Yeah.
The thing Nick has to have is to make sure his cards, or in the matchup, that his cards count, it would seem, you know? He
Right.
could play something like Arbor Colossus, but if Cedric just has the Doomblade for it, it doesn't matter that it was a 5 versus a 2,
Right.
they still trade.
He invested, you know, these fractions of these other cards into it and is getting 1 for, quote, 1. It's a pretty big disadvantage. You need to get value out of your cards if you're going to invest so much into them.
So Cedric has to worry about things like Rurik Thar at this point, I
Yeah.
would guess.
Rurik Thar, any of the Planeswalkers are going to be good if, like, for 1 activation plus the Needle, and then you can follow it up with another.
Yeah.
Any big creature is going to be enough to put Cedric on the back foot.
All right, Nick's going to shock on turn 3, and he does have that Mistcutter Hydra for 4. He also has Boon Satyr in his hand, but he's going to go ahead and swing that. Cedric drops to 15, and you're talking about Cedric being behind. Now it looks, you know, that just looks like it's been compounded by that play.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, being on the draw with tapped lands against mana accelerants
And haste creatures.
and haste creatures, yeah. Every turn feels like you're a full turn more behind. So we do see Pithing Needle probably naming Nykthos.
You can name Nykthos won't do anything.
It's a mana ability,
It's
right.
a mana ability. So we'll see Pithing Needle's on Garruk.
Okay, preempt the Garruk. I like that.
Yeah, and that's actually pretty good. One of the things,
That's the one that you have to preempt.
yeah, if Nick plays a Garruk and plussed it, that would be so bad for Cedric. He
Yes.
doesn't even want to let him activate it once before killing it.
You can handle a 2/2 or a Domri Raid, you know, drawing a
If Dominated gets 1 card,
fraction of a card or something like that. Not a huge deal, but if Garruk plussed, you can fall really far behind.
all right, and second Mistcutter Hydra comes down. Cedric drops to 11. Nick no land, ships the turn back. His hand looks to be
This
a
is-
Voyaging Satyr, a Boon Satyr, and a Destructive Revelry.
This was the Supreme Verdict turn, but Cedric did not have it.
Yeah, this would be a great turn for Supreme Verdict.
But a Hero's Downfall is not bad either.
Go
All
ahead.
right, I've dealt with 2 of your Haymakers.
And it looks like Nick's starting to run out of Haymakers. He just has 2 mana creatures and a Boon Satyr right now.
Green Arrow, Hawkeye, Robin Hood, or some other kind of
Attack
monster, and you have lost your quiver. Please come and claim it lost and found.
Alright, so Elvish Mystic hits Cedric down to 10. Caryatid makes a replacement 1. And he's going to leave up 3 mana, probably for an end-step Boon Satyr.
Yep, it appears that way. Cedric's scrying to the bottom. And now it's just a matter of whether Cedric can, you know, turn the corner, pull fully ahead before succumbing to the pressure.
Yeah, Cedric untapped 4 lands. He's debating whether or not to tap out for something here. You see, we know he has a Revelation in hand, so he just needs to stay alive.
All right, he passes and Nick chooses not to use his Boon Satyr.
Nick's draw for the turn is another land, so he's still pretty light on action. And he's going to go ahead and swing the 2 Mystics. No fear of Azorius Charm. or not able to play around it. Hits Cedric down to 8, and
Oh no, it's
not
Bestow.
8. He's going to go ahead and try to put him down to 4 with this bestowed Boon Satyr.
Well, now we know why he didn't end step it, saving it for the Bestow ability.
Yeah, and that's going to draw out a Hero's Downfall to take care of the Elvish Mystic. So Cedric takes 1 and goes to 9. We'll see now. He seemed a little reluctant to use the Downfall, presumably like he was saving it for a Planeswalker. I think
Yeah.
Boon Satyr really forced his hand there, which is really one of the strengths of the card. It forced Cedric to use a Hero's Downfall on Elvish Mystic,
Yes.
which
That is not exactly what Cedric had in mind.
it looks like his hand is just lands in a Revelation, so he's going to have to cash in that Revelation a little earlier than he may have wanted.
Yep, going down to 7, looking to go to 10.
All right, Cedric 6 lands in play, but Nick is all lands too. He drew a Stomping Ground, still has Voyaging Satyr and Destructive Revelry, so he has Cedric. If Cedric takes this before Revelating, he's actually dead here. So he
Right.
wisely Revelations first.
Smart.
So we'll go up to 10, but Cedric is gonna, he doesn't know it, but he's at a virtual 3 life.
Look like he does have a dissolve, so he left in his counters, or at least one.
Yeah, he had a Dissolve in the Jace. I think that he does have to do the counters. Against a ramp deck, even Cancel's pretty good counter spell.
Yeah.
But he doesn't have a way to deal with that Boon Satyr yet. And now at 5, things are starting to get pretty tight for him.
What was he thinking about? Jace Plus?
Yeah, I don't think he has the untapped land for Dissolve either.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, so I think he's debating whether, he obviously wants to leave up Dissolve, but at the cost of 2 life, that's pretty aggressive.
Yeah. I guess he's thinking about if he minuses, what is he drawing to, versus if he pluses.
Yeah, if he minuses, it's to a Doomblade, or, I would think it's to a Doomblade.
Here's
So
Jace.
here's Jason. Now the question is, what does he do with it? He knows it, and he's going to go ahead and plus it.
I like it.
Play a Temple. Now we know Cedric with no plays at the moment. His hand is 2 lands and a Dissolve. Leaves card on top and passes back.
Could have scryed first if you were going to play Jace, but now we see Nick untapping and representing 3 with Destructive Revelry in hand.
And Nick's still flooding pretty hard. His draw was another Nykthos there. So what's on the board is what he has. He does have it lethal. He's going to go ahead and swing at Cedric for 3. Cedric goes down to 2. Is he going to go for the Destructive Revelry on the Pithing Needle? That would be lethal. He's going to go ahead, it looks like, and do it.
Bang!
And Cedric he has the Dissolve, but doesn't have the mana for it. That works. Cedric could have had the mana for it, but he would have had to shock to do it, which defeats the point.
Right.
So he takes 2 either way. And Nick with just enough damage to deal with that. One more life point, and Cedric's really in that game.
Yeah, I think so too. For how flooded Nick was, that was a very close game. Or he won. He won despite being flooded.
Despite being
and it was
really
close.
flooded.
Like the back-to-back Hydra's turns, like even though Cedric answered them right away, he still took the hit from them, so that his life total was just too low by the time he stabilized.
Yeah, and I think I want to talk a little bit about the card. I think the card that got Nick that game is Boon Satyr. So Boon Satyr is a card that originally didn't see play in most of the red-green lists, but really has kind of come into its own here. I think it's one of those deceptively powerful cards.
Yeah, it first started just as another card for Ban Hexproof, because
Right, it's an aura, right?
Yeah, it can do 2 different things, But yeah, it's found its way into these more aggressive and even mid-rangey decks just as a value card.
Yeah, I
Just
mean,
efficient stats, good in different matchups.
well, it's really a double threat a lot of times. You saw there, it forced Cedric to, Hero's Downfall of an elf.
Yeah, it turns Elvish Mystic into Thragtusk. Right? It's pretty
Yeah,
good.
that's exactly. I suppose
it's
when it
pretty
dies,
close.
instead of getting a 3/3, you get a 4/2.
Right.
It's about the
and
same
you don't,
card.
And you don't get to gain 5 life. I think that's a fair trade-off.
Well, you did pay an extra card for it.
Oh,
To be
dang.
fair. Not exactly. It's not actually a Thragtusk, but It's a 5-3, so we'll take
It's
it.
a 5-3 that gets you a guy when it dies. It's a Thragtusk.
And you discard a card. And you're very happy, and costs one more. And you're still very happy to cast it.
Yes. That's how good Thragtusk
That's how good,
was.
yeah. So yeah, it does. We didn't see many post-board cards there from Cedric. It looks like he's boarded in the Pithing Needles. I'm not sure if he's boarded in really anything else.
No, we saw Pithing Needles and we saw a Dissolve, so he is still on those. It's probably just a small change that he made.
Yeah, and there was one of the dangers in the matchup that we saw there is that there's such this fine line, it seems, that Nick has to walk between wanting ramp spells and really not wanting ramp spells.
Yeah.
As we saw there, the ramp spells never, like, he was able to ramp up to 5 mana on turn 3 on the play, and it didn't seem like, it's questionable how much it mattered. You know, his Hydras were one bigger thanks to some of the guys, but
Yeah.
as long as they still trade with the same cards.
He wasn't really punishing Cedric for being, like, for how far ahead he was, he wasn't really, sticking it to him. It was more just like play a 4/4.
Yeah, it's playful.
And I think that, in theory, Cedric's deck should be favored, especially in those types of games. But you need something like a Supreme Verdict. Like a Supreme Verdict from Cedric at any point in that game was basically game over.
Yeah, we've been very strong.
Yeah.
Or even just one more Doomblade. It's one of those things where Cedric has all the tools, but I kind of said if he misses once, he has to answer every threat and he's fine. But if he misses one, the red-green deck really punishes you for it.
There's no wrong questions.
Yeah, every question's good.
Yep. So here they go, pulling up their 7s. Cedric on the play this time, so he won't be as embarrassingly far behind.
Yeah, leads out on a tap land. Really just developing his mana base.
Yep. Trying to.
And he has an Azorius Charm. Do we see it? Do you cycle this or do you use it still as a kill spell? It's pretty good in the matchup.
It is. I think you still cycle it this early. You want to be able to make sure that you're hitting those land drops and getting to a point in the game where you're revelating.
Yeah, Nick digging in for some late game too. He went Temple of Abandon into Elvish Mystic with another Temple of Abandon. Scryed to the bottom on that second one. It's looking like nothing very threatening at first, but I imagine we'll start seeing the action happen on turn 3.
Yes. This is that magical turn. Let's see what Nick has for us.
I think, ideally he'd have a Domri here.
And there you go.
He does, and he's able to play it around Syncopate there by having that extra mana. Flips into a Boon Satyr, and Domri really is one of the all-stars of this matchup for the green-red deck.
Absolutely. Planeswalkers in general are good against control, but Domri in particular.
So Nick, just a little note there, Nick swung with the Elvish Mystic. He probably wants to swing with the Elvish Mystic first, so that if it gets Azorius Charm...
He draws the Elvish Mystic?
Yeah, so he probably wants to not use the Domri pre-combat.
Right.
He probably wants to use it post-combat.
The little things.
Yeah. I mean, as it turns out, then he would, he got the Boon Satyr.
Yeah,
he got his card.
Anyway. It's all good.
Alright, so Cedric, his first play of the game is going to be his own Planeswalker. It's Jace. He's going to go ahead and plus it to keep the Mystic off. But that'll give Nick more chances to draw cards here. He draws into an Elvish Mystic anyway. We see in his hand he also has a Nylea. He has the Boon Satyr he found. And can he find more off Domri? He will. It'll be a Voyaging Satyr. And this is the kind of draw where Nykthos is going to start to become a card.
Yep. It scales quite quickly once you're drawing cards.
His land tapped is Gruul Guildgate, but Elvish Mystics are basically free right now. Well, they're not free yet.
Right, once we get into Nykthos land, they will be, but...
Yeah, he's 1 mana short. He passes the turn, definitely representing an end-step Boon Satyr.
Supreme Verdict for Cedric, not at its best, but decent. And let's go digging. Jace hits Jace, another Supreme Verdict in a land.
What I like about this is that he's slow-rolled the Supreme Verdict so that Nick might be thinking that he wants the Supreme Verdict more than he actually does.
Yeah.
Nick here thinks, oh yeah, you really need a Supreme Verdict, where the truth is he doesn't need it. And Cedric,
Mind games.
Cedric may have gotten a free land off this. Like,
Right.
I think if he knows that Cedric has the verdict, he probably splits Jace and Jace by itself.
Cedric actually considering taking the backup verdict here instead of the 2-card pile. I wouldn't fault him too badly for it.
Yeah, I mean, verdict is still very good. But
Deep in the tank about this one. Well, how do you continue from here? Because you know you're getting Boon Satyred at end step, right?
you know that a Boon Satyr is happening, so you know that your Jace is probably dead. I think you want the replacement Jace as a result. And
Yeah,
the land
that's
never
fair.
hurt.
That's fair.
Unless he thinks he can actually protect the Jace. The other thing he has to worry about is that he needs to find his way to a downfall or a detention sphere. You can't actually beat a Domri emblem out of Esper.
Yeah. It's not possible.
That's not, and I mean, in theory you can, but it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it doesn't happen in reality.
So
Domri's ult is 7, so we have 3 turns, or
Yeah.
2 turns.
I think that's another argument for taking the Jace.
Dig deeper for another one of those
if you
answers.
don't have the answer yet, you need to draw one.
I agree with that.
Yeah, Domirod, especially if your creature deck digs its way, can draw cards on its way to ultimating.
Yeah. Alright, so he takes Verdict and casts it right away.
It's going to float mana, floating 3, casting Boon Satyr, to no one's surprise. Cedric makes a tap land and passes.
So this looks like a pretty good situation for Nick. Not necessarily ideal, but, you know.
When Nizeel presses advantage, he drews the Nagos. Domri misses for the turn, so it's the first time he's going to miss with one.
Another Planeswalker.
Yeah, and this is where the game gets really hard for Cedric. Nick, the green-red Devotion deck just has so many threats.
Yeah. So many resilient threats.
Yeah. Boon Satyr will take care of Jace. Satyr will go hit Cedric. Cedric drops to 17. And this kind of non-Nykthos draw is really similar to what the other red-green decks, kind of how they kind of play. There's Elvish Mystics into early Planeswalkers.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good plan. Early Planeswalkers are hard to beat in just about any matchup, or format for that matter.
Yeah. So Cedric, somewhat stable on the board. He's facing down 8 damage next turn, and also needs to take care of the Domri. It's like he knows he has the spells to answer this, but how is he going to cast them all in time?
How do you string them together to stabilize the most effectively?
We'll see. Cedric contemplating on his scry here. He knows he needs an answer for the Domri. That's probably the most pressing things are the Domri and the creatures on the table.
Yes.
The Xenagos, he probably has a couple turns to be okay with. I guess the other worry is that Nykthos is going to be able to start pumping out even more threats. Like, he would hate to see, Nick play a Garruk next turn. That would...
Yeah, that would not be good.
A third Planeswalker. Unless, of course, he has a Merciless Eviction, which, would be...
I do not believe
no,
he does.
he doesn't play them.
No. So we're scrying right now on the Black-White Temple. We're going to read Nykthos.
Yeah, so I was talking with a player about Nykthos math, how to count the Nykthos. Basically, it's your devotion minus 2 is how you start out by counting it. You can say it taps through devotion minus 2. What it also does is each untapped Nykthos makes every on-color card in your hand cost 1 less, is the other way to think about it. So think about it's like an Emerald Medallion, if you've ever played with those guys. If you have a Voyaging Satyr in play, the Voyaging Satyr is like another medallion, so when you count it. So say you had Boon Satyr, it's like Boon Satyr, if you had a Voyaging Satyr and a Nykthos in play, your Boon Satyr costs 1 right now.
Right.
As long as they're still untapped. So like that's kind of like how you count your Nykthos mana.
Shortcutting
the shortcutting the Nykthos mana is Nykthos' devotion minus 2, and for every untapped Nykthos or Voyaging Satyr, it knocks 1 off all your spells.
Right. All right, so looks like Cedric finished scrying.
Yeah, I love Esper control decks. You play your whole turn is you play a tapped land. You look at the top card to scry. You spend 30 seconds.
For a minute, yeah.
Then you say top and say go.
Top go. Yep.
And Nick returns to being on the attack here. second Satyr. This is going to be an 8-point swing. And the scary part is Nick still has a full grip of cards.
Yeah. Not to mention the 2 Planeswalkers still in play.
Yeah, and I believe Nick also has the Garruk here.
Wow.
So Doomblade comes out from Cedric. For the Boon Satyr, if you're Nick, that does take away your ability to cast Garruk.
Awkward.
But now the pressure's on Cedric. Domri goes up 1. It is 1 away from making an emblem.
Pressure's on.
Yeah, we may see Nick use this opportunity to land a Nylea.
It looks like what's going to happen.
All right, and it does resolve. So, first things first, this turn Cedric's going to have to answer Domri. He cannot beat that emblem. The second thing, Nick can hit Cedric for a lot of damage. It's like he almost needs untapped land. Verdict. No, Verdict doesn't do anything. Oh man, he needs a lot.
Yes.
He needs like some Azorius Charms and a Detention Sphere. That would probably...
A Detention Sphere and a Needle. Something like that.
A Needle would be great. See, first play, 3 mana here. He's going to go for Divination. Means he doesn't have the answers in hand. He hits Doomblade and Jace. No way to answer that Domri. So for those who don't know, the Domri emblem here gives your creatures Hexproof, Trample, Double Strike, and Haste, which...
Banding, Shadow...
And Life... No. There's a lot of...
Rampage 3.
Right. It's there's a lot of emblems, or like Planeswalker Ultimates that are just fancy ways of saying you win the game. And Domri almost falls into that category.
Yeah.
Especially in a deck that would play him, the card...
It takes a little bit of work, but not much.
No, every creature becomes insane. Every creature becomes must answer. Even the 1 power, even the 1/1s are pretty big deals.
Yeah.
And on top of that, they all have Hexproof. It's really a nightmare to play against. Cedric reading that means that it's gonna happen, which that's gonna be difficult.
That does not bode well. And it looks like Cedric's gonna play his 4th land and then Jace. He might be dead on board.
Man. Yeah, he might be dead on board.
He was
He's only at
that
13.
Jace like he was gonna play it, but
He has a Jace and a Verdict available. And so there's Jace. You can tell if you're Nick, you are thrilled at this play.
I can't imagine. I haven't done the math yet, but I can't imagine this isn't lethal.
It's probably not lethal, but it's really close. Well, he just gets... It's very possibly lethal, actually.
Yeah.
Between those... Well, because Nick, as you see here, we'll see the potential of what Xenagos does here. Nick will probably plus the Xenagos for mana to activate more Nyleas. If Nick
for more double strike action.
So if Nick does something like, play Boon, main phase Boon Satyr, plus Xenagos, make 5 mana, activate Nykthos. So watch this, 2 Voyaging Satyrs were played. So now Xenagos is plussed, that's going to be 5 mana.
4, right?
Oh, sorry, 4. 4 mana. Xenagos is not a creature.
He accidentally activated the Domri first. He should have 1 more mana. But now the Voyaging Satyrs...
Yeah, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4 mana symbols. So that taps for 2. So that puts him up to 5 mana total. 6 mana. Oh gosh. Okay, so Voyaging Satyr taps for 2 more, so that's 5, so it's up to 7. That's going to be up to 9. Goes down to 3 to cast Garruk. So he probably should have cast the Garruk after he was at 7 before using the other one.
Yeah. There's definitely a more efficient way to do all of this.
Getting
but I don't think it matters that much.
Yeah, because he would have gotten the Garruk, and then he would have gotten the Burning Tree Emissary here, which means that the next tap of the Voyaging Satyr would have been for 5 mana, so he would have had an extra 4.
And all this...
This does not matter.
Yeah,
He's like, Cedric's still real dead. The Nylea now is actually online, so no, Cedric's just actually down on board.
Do see
Burning Tree Emissary into Mistcutter Hydra.
for 3, I think. If
This
all my
is-
math is right, for 4. All right. I choose to believe you.
It doesn't really matter. This is very lethal. Yeah, so this is the power of the green-red devotion decks here.
4, 7, 8, 9.
Oh, remember,
10,
it's doubled.
10 double striked. Yep.
Yeah, and that's after the Jace triggers.
Yes.
Okay, so Nick Verrall,
It's only 20 damage
only 20
because
damage.
of the Jace trigger.
2 games to 1 defeats Cedric Phillips.
So when we were talking about how some insane explosive turns and draws the devotion deck has, that was a good example.
Yeah, that was a great example of what the deck's capable
The
of
power
doing.
of Nykthos.
Yeah.
Why does that card tap for mana?
Nykthos? Oh, I should just not tap for mana?
Yeah.
Probably wouldn't be
not for a
playable then.
colorless, right?
Probably wouldn't be. You probably couldn't play it.
I'd still play it.
I don't know. I mean, it's still very good once it gets going.
Oh, it's just insane when it gets going.
No, so this green red devotion deck is probably